All right, I believe it's time to begin. We are about 7 meters below the feet of Venkat, talking about Kotlin right now, but you chose the Bash instead of Kotlin, right? Knowing that Bash is worse than a Kotlin. Interesting choice. But I believe this is the best place to be. It's the coolest room on this conference, coolest in the two meanings, I hope, not only the temperature. I'm Michał Kordas. I work in Luxsoft, doing everything what is needed to deliver the quality software, meaning development, testing, analysis, and process coordination. And I'm also a trainer in Luxsoft training, where I teach people about Java, about agile testing. I haven't done any training on Bash. I'm just here talking about the worst parts of Bash I know. And I like to begin with my history of me with the Bash. It was about 6 years ago when one of my first tasks in the software development company was to write a script that will download the feeds to a particular directory and then send it to some external system. So the tasks sounded easy. Yeah, we'll create several lines in Bash, we'll test it, we'll provide it to prod services to execute. And from the very beginning, the quality was really important. We tested it really thoroughly, making sure that it will work. And to make it behaving, I would say, always in the same way, we put in the script rm-rf to make sure this target directory where the feeds should be downloaded will be always clear so that the script could be run multiple times without interfering with the previous runs. So we really made sure that it will remove only the correct files, nothing else, and we gave it documented to the prod services to execute. So it was supposed to run during the weekend. 9 a.m. on Saturday, the call from prod service guys saying, "Where are my files?" All my files are gone. Important production information is gone. What did you do? So I started to analyze this script after logging in to work from home, and I check everything is fine. No error in the script. And I ask, how did you invoke it? Download feeds, target directory, home directory, yeah, because home directory is the place where I keep all the files that I work with. And you know what happened. Entire home directory with all the previous activities were deleted. So my first journey with the Bash was messing up with really important data, and actually it was not due to Bash weaknesses, it was about lack of thinking what we do and lack of checking whether this directory is not a home or not directory which contains important files. And then after this happened, we didn't have too much task about Bash. But from time to time, there was some deployment script to write, some cleanup, some moving of files, installation. So this Bash was always somewhere in the background. And there was one day when the colleague of mine just said, "Oh, shit, have you seen that all the newspapers are writing right now about the guy that just deleted the entire company of him by one line of bad code?" So entire team gathered, "Oh, let's see it, what just happened?" And this was the question on Stack Overflow asked by Marco Marsala, who said that he's running hosting company with 1,500 customers, and he had Ansible script to automate operations, and they are run on all servers they have on company. And this Bash script had an rm minus rf with two parameters. Doesn't matter what they were, some foo/bar. And he made some mistake in the script with those variables being undefined. And if those are undefined, what remains? Just a slash. What is slash in Linux? It is parent directory of everything, right? So effectively, he invoked rm minus rf slash on all servers in his company, even backup servers, because there was some maintenance required also on backup servers, right? And more than the question, interesting were the answers that he received, right? There is actually no recovery from it. Instead of asking us on Stack Overflow technical guys what to do, you should rather go to your lawyer and ask how to prepare money to pay those customers for your faults. You are just going out of the business. If you don't have any backups, you just nuked your entire company. You cannot do anything. There was similarity with this Russian roulette for the sysadmin, right? And it's famous because it mostly is fine, right? 5 of the 6 cases, it's working as nicely, and people do enjoy, but just 1 per 6 tries, it just removes everything. And in those comments, there was just one reasonable one, that everything could have been prevented by just setting one option that is not a default in bash, which is set -o, no unset, right? Bash is a strange language that is designed that if you don't set variable but you use it, it will work. It will just evaluate to empty string, right? Strange default, but it is like it is. So we need to know about it, that to always use no unset to prevent such issues. Actually, this was just a hoax. This guy was just playing with people. He didn't remove all the files. He just posted this on Stack Overflow to promote his company. And in default, indeed, you cannot do this rm minus rf slash because Linux prevents it. You need to put some option to make it allowable. So it's not true. However, it gives you information that knowing a bash, what these strange defaults are, is really important. A couple of months later, we had another task to write a bash script, and we gave it to a new joiner. Brand new guy came to the office. He was willing to take any task that he could. And he said to me at some point that while doesn't work for him in bash anymore. I said, oh, guy, while loop is the simplest thing you can do, right? The most basic building block. How the hell while is not working for you? And I came to his desk, and I see, indeed, you have while that is correctly formed, and it's giving you syntax error, unexpected end of file. All right, so I started to browse internet. Entire knowledge about the bash fell down because I hoped I know how to write a loop, but then I see it doesn't work. What is going on? So I copied this code, and I started it on my machine. Exactly the same code, exactly the same while loop, and it works. What is going on? What do you do in such cases? Exactly the same code works on someone's machine, and it doesn't work on yours. So we compared the bash version, yeah, that I use, that my colleague uses, and it was exactly the same bash version. All right, so we gave this code to all the team members that we have, and we asked, can you please run this while loop for us? We'll compare the results. And exactly half of the team said it's working. Another part of the team said it doesn't work for me. My mind started to blow. How the hell is that possible? No one knows the answer? Can you repeat? Line endings, exactly. That's the most common fault that you can make and receive the strange errors. That some of the guys were coding in Notepad or Notepad++ that uses Windows line endings. And some of them, like me, were using IntelliJ, where I have enforced Linux line endings, right? So while loop behaves correctly when you have Linux line endings, if you have RN, it doesn't work at all, giving unexpected end of a file. So the solution was to go to this guy and actually see that Notepad++ is used, and to press this tiny button to show non-printable characters, and it appeared that indeed CR is there, and such bash code is not going to work without any warning. And those line endings are ridiculous. For example, by having such code, just 2 lines of the code, just normal shebang, and the option that we talk about, set -o, no unset, nothing else. If you use Windows line endings for 2-line script, you receive such error. Invalid option, name T, no unset. If you Google this error, it gives 0 results. How often you see that page, that something never happened in the internet? Probably a few years ago, right? Everything you can find, especially every error string. Every stack trace is repeated on the internet thousands of times, but you cannot see the error out of 2-line bash scripts using Windows new lines. Yeah? Basically, it's kind of random error generator if you use CRLF, so that Google won't help you how to solve it. You just need to remember to always enforce Linux line endings. So the Krakow was built by bash programmers. You'll have mostly skeletors, maybe just one Błękitek, right, the successful script, but all the others will be broken. Your experiences won't be good. And actually, bash is ugly. When I first time in my life seen the switch statement in bash, I couldn't believe this is happening. I couldn't believe that this is the only recommended correct way how to write case script. Look at it. Double semicolon, just closing parentheses without opening it. ASAC at the end. What the hell? How it looks? Star, closing parentheses. But this is the bash, right? Actually, the syntax of bash is inherited from Algol from the early 70s. And due to some many historical reasons, this is how it should look. But it's nothing similar to any other language that we use currently. And there are 2 demons of the bash that for sure you've heard about on the code review or on some pages about general hints for the bash. And those are named word splitting and globbing. So you will hear them again and again and again, because those are built into the language. Word splitting happens, for example, whenever you have some expressions, you put after echo some words, the first visible thing that you'll notice is that it eats all the spaces. So it takes all the arguments to echo, and white spaces are the word separators, and it splits it again and puts it on the console. However, this is the simplest case when you may encounter the word splitting. The worst is if you just want to print an array in bash. For example, if someone had a task to just print this array, this is valid array in bash with three main conferences that we all love. We just want to print it on the console. Nothing simpler, right? So what could we do? There is for syntax. We put variable name in name of the array, then do echo. We print what this element, and done. What do you receive as a result of such loop? So much goodness. Name of the variable of the array, so something is wrong. Oh, we forgot just this $sign, right? So it was interpreted as a literal, and it just printed, we want the variable. The variable, so much goodness. All right, so if we put this missing $sign, what happens? We get geek on, but where is the rest? We want at least Devoxx, right? Where it went? There is no issue at all. All the other elements were just skipped. No warning, no error. Just geek on, right? So we Google, we check on Stack Overflow. Oh, indeed, we forgot this really strange syntax that I never can remember, which is open bracket, ampersand, closing bracket. And only then it takes all the elements of the array, not just the first. But wait, it gives geek on. Oh, not exactly what we wanted, right? So still something is missing. And it appears that also we are missing these curly braces around the variable name. And now we get all the elements, right? But we have more elements than conferences, right? What has happened? The word splitting has happened because we forgot about yet another thing, which are the quotes. If we don't put those quotes, the words will be split by default, right? So we need to remember about all kinds of brackets, braces, and also quotes just to iterate over an array. So you see how the bash syntax is bad. Second daemon, globbing, right? So if you have a message for the user, please enter a file name matching.zip. Yeah, this is just from the server to the client. We are sending this message. And by echoing such message, we may reveal what files we have on a disk, right? Because by default, the star is expanded to all the zip files that we have on the disk. And those could be things that we don't want to show to others. So globbing and word splitting. There is a nice article about it on Stack Overflow. And there is a question, and the best voted answer just contains 3 types of people. 3 types of people who omit to quote variables in bash. And the first are the beginners. They just don't know. You don't know that every variable in bash should be quoted. Second type of people are the people that know about it, but they just forget, and they run into the issues. And there is third, most common. So people that you hammer every time that always you need to put quotes into your variables in the bash, but they believe for sure author of the bash wouldn't be able to design such bad language that quotes are always required. For sure, this is not the case. In my case, those quotes are not needed. The quotes are only for some special cases, but not for my case. But unfortunately, that was the intention. The intention was to quote all the variables. Because if we don't quote, it actually invokes 3 functions. If there is a command with some parameter without quotes, it involves command, globbing, and word splitting over this variable. 3 functions that take CPU cycles to invoke. If we quote, we just invoke the command, right? So only if we intentionally want to invoke those 2 additional functions and waste CPU cycles, we should not quote. In all the other cases, the quotes are necessary. So probably you will forget about it anyway. You will be this third category, but I'll try to hammer a bit more to your minds. Because I saved about half an hour of your life right now. This answer on Stack Overflow is that long and gives so many security issues, the programming mistakes that you can make if you don't code variables, right? Please do, and then you don't need to read about those bad things that may happen, right? And we have more demons than two, actually. There are many tricky parts of the bash. You need to very carefully quote. There is stream redirection that is tricky. There are some pipe failures, command substitutions, break expansion, file clobbering. So these dark parts of bash is almost the majority of the language. And not only the demons, but also there are weaknesses. For example, bash is just slow. We don't have any data structures. So, for example, linked list is almost impossible. We cannot have trees, stacks, queues, nothing like that. Everything, almost everything, is a string. So this language is stringly typed. No other types. We don't have any try-catch. No exceptions. Even functions cannot return any values. That could be surprising for you, but indeed, every function is a function that has no value. It could return some stream, but nothing else, some stream of strings. You cannot pass any reference to variable, array, or function. You can just pass the name. And every function is a global function, which means there is horror of reusability. Right? You need to very carefully choose your function names to not run into the clashes. That's basically using any libraries written in bash is really tricky, because you may add some library that breaks the previous libraries because there is some clash of the functions. And this is not solved. So there are many complications in bash, and those are summarized on the mywiki-woolech.org page. Bash weaknesses, and I chose for you some most important parts of it. That shell functions are totally freaked, and if you plan to write especially large bash scripts, you need to pay even more attention than to any other code in any other language. You need to apply every single good practice that you know, and this would not be enough. You need to also hold this consistent style and know all those corner cases that you may run into. So the question appears, when to use such bad language? So it appears that whenever the logic requires arrays, or we have some bigger than, for example, 100 lines, most style guides and people would agree that the bash is not the good choice. So we use bash only when the performance doesn't matter, when something is really small, there are no data structures, and we interact with processes. That's where the bash rocks most in, when we interact with the low-level OS APIs, and basically nothing else. So it means some simple wrapper scripts, no business logic. So the bash is very useful as a glue, and it has no other usages than it. However, it is the best glue available. Imagine just writing interaction between processes in Java. This would be horrible, right? It improved in the latest Java versions a bit, but still you need to care about the output streams, input streams to the processes. The syntax is not concise, and you may create a monster out of it. So the bash rocks whenever you have those many interactions. And actually, bash is everywhere. So Venkat right now up there is talking about the Kotlin, but how you install Kotlin on your machine? Via bash. Right? So on the official Kotlin page, they recommend you to do some curl of SDK man and invoke bash on it. If you want to install Node.js, on the official page, they give this bit of bash code. If you want to use Kubernetes, which conquered the entire Devoxx conference this year, also, that's a bash, right? You need to be careful about all the bad things that may happen in this complex piping and stream redirection that is going on there. So we see that bash is everywhere. We cannot avoid it. However, the London Knoll said some time ago that he was reviewing the lot of various bash scripts. And the language invites to create the code that is cryptic and therefore completely useless because of no conventional and no code style used. And we cannot be proud of such code. Even if this is just a wrapper script, nothing really complex, all the code styles and conventions really matter because otherwise it becomes a cipher. So by default, there is no quality in bash. There are no tools that could help improve the situation, that could unify the style, that could detect the most common errors, mistake. The command is just not found. So is there anything that we can do about it? Right? Maybe it will be easier than not having a smog in Krakow this winter again. And apparently, one of the simplest things that we can do is reuse all we know from the other languages. And as I spoke before, we need to pay even more attention than to other languages because there are so many issues that you may run into with. So, for example, descriptive names are as important as anywhere else. So using a bash does not give you permission to use single-letter variables, for example, while many people think, OK, this is just a script, I can do it. But you can't. Similarly with breaking into the functions. So it's no different than any language that you are allowed to write script that has 100 lines of code and no functions within it. You need to break it into, at most, couple of lines, simple functionality with proper, careful names. Also, avoiding any redundancy, using the simplest syntax available is important just to not create code that takes more time to understand, and that is surprising, right? So you need to know, for example, that instead of running a command and checking its status of execution by $? And comparing to 0 of those strange syntax, you're just allowed to type if command, which is much simpler, much less error prone, and just works the same. So besides that, there are many various style guides that you could apply. So there are many attempts in the industry to just say what is fine in the bash, what you should actually avoid. So as you see, some of them are on GitHub. There are also Chromium advices. And personally, I would recommend to read them all, because sometimes they disagree, but mostly they agree. You could have some common sense of what is fine and what you should avoid on those pages. However, the most common, and probably some of you already know it, is the Google Shell Style Guide. It doesn't look very pretty. It's just HTML page with some dedication and various rules. And for example, it discusses which shell actually we should use. So till now, I just said to you that there is a bash, but actually there are various scripting languages, and bash is just many of them. And this style guide says, don't use any other except bash. It doesn't give any exceptions, right? And if you check by invoking the command man-a intro, it gives you information that actually there is ash, bash, chsh, dash, zsh, and many others that could give you the similar functionality. And I've met a couple of guys that were a fan of some specific ones because it is more powerful, but using all of them or mixing them is not helpful for development. So Google, for example, decided everyone should use the bash because this is the most common. It is almost everywhere on almost machine. So let's use it. Actually, there are also other reference commands that if you don't have connection to internet, right, and you want to learn about the bash, this is man bash, man, interesting command, help info, that you may learn about the bash from the console directly. So let's compare the bash to the most common alternative, which is the Standard Posix Shell. The biggest difference is that the bash is driven by implementation. So there is one implementation existing, and the standard is defined by implementation, while this Posix shell is standard, and it has many implementations. For example, Dash, the standard Bourne shell, KSH 88, and this is standardized and more portable. So as you see, the Google recommends us to not use this more portable and standardized version. It recommends us to use the bash. It's because it is extended version, almost as popular as the Posix, and gives more power, and it is bit less prone to the errors. And the thing about the shebangs, if you want to use the standard shell, you declare it as bin sh, and the bash is bin bash. However, the most common that I've encountered in the scripts is the second version. There are discussions and some flame wars on the internet which one we should actually use, which is more universal, and it appears that some distributions of Linux do not have bash under this location, but it always could be found by invoking this env command and asking about where is the bash. So the second one in both versions is the more universal. It works in more cases, and this would be my recommendation. You use the second alternative everywhere just for simplicity. So why to use bash over this standard Posix shell? Because it has support for arrays, it has better comparison operator, it allows us to create the loops as we know from Java, arithmetics. And also we have local variables. So in this standard shell, everything is global, not only functions, but also variables, which is even worse. And I think this is the biggest reason to use the bash, because we can declare the things with the local. What about extensions? So Google recommendation is to do not use extensions if something is executable. So if this is the starter script, entry point, just name it without dot. And for libraries that you just need to put sh. So for example, how your IDE will know that this file is a bash? Actually, it can detect via this shebang, where you should use it in every script that you have. Shell style guide also says about the commands. It recommends to put a bit of documentation to every file to give a context why the script is needed. And we do it by the hash sign. It also recommends to comment every longer and non-obvious function with that style. There is no just one agreed across the industry way of writing the comments like the Javadoc is, but we can use this one. But in general, we shouldn't write complex functions. So I would say that if you need to comment a lot your script, you are failing to express your intentions, as the Bob Martin recommends us for Java. So the rule applies the same. And you can use implementation commands to comment tricky and non-obvious code, and you will have more such code in the bash than in probably any other language. So if, for example, in Java you don't use much comments, inline comments over the code, probably in bash you should use more, right? So remember about it. So do not use exactly the same rules about commenting between various languages, because there are more strange things going on there, right? Keep this in mind for the future readers of your code, which may be you, that you will forget what you've written 6 months later. Naming conventions are really simple in Bash. We use upper snake case for the constants, for the global variables, and they should be put on the top of the file with read-only. And for the local variables, we use lower snake case, and we should use local keywords like that. And there's some proposed order in the file that there are constants, functions, then the main function, just to signify this is the entry point, and invocation of the main function with all the parameters that were provided. Usually, there should be just one line of executable code for longer scripts. Everything else is driven by main and then another functions. Style guides do not recommend us to use backticks. Those are deprecated, mostly because the quoting is ridiculously hard. So if you have two commands, one invokes the other, the quoting is really, like nesting is really tricky because you need to escape. So one level of nesting is fine because there's just one escape, but if you want to have two levels of nesting, then you need to put 3 backslashes. If you nest 4 backticks, you need to use 5 slashes. So such code isn't readable at all, where this syntax of $ parentheses is very easy to nest and generally is a newer alternative that doesn't have the issues of backticks. Same regarding the conditions. In the Posix shell, we have just this single brace test or this command user bin brace. So as you see, this is the command, normal bash command that we can invoke. While the bash has a new syntax of double bracket, which is just more intuitive and less error prone. For example, in the bash, using these double quotes, we could write the normal comparison between the variables holding integers. While using the single quotes, if we don't escape this lower sign, it will be treated as a streamer direction, right? So, and we'll probably won't get any error. The script will continue, but with very strange behavior. And it's very easy to forget about escaping. That's why this is just more intuitive. Again, those single braces may be really surprising when we forget to quote this variable. For example, the compilation result, the execution result of this code depends on the amount of the files in the current directory. If you have 1, it will pass, will give you some result, true or false, but if there will be 2 files in the current directory, it will fail because the syntax is incorrect. So it could be very surprising that sometimes the same script has valid syntax, sometimes it doesn't. Style guide also says about the traditional formatting. So generally, every statement should be in separate lines, but there is exception. Traditional, we put if, and then in the same line, same goes for, and while, that there is semicolon and do. Other than that, we shouldn't use semicolons. Like every line has whole separate statement. And also the style guide comments on the most controversial topic, whether we should use tabs or spaces. Google says you should always use 2 spaces, right, period. I would say doesn't really matter, but by reading various style guides, the general agreement in industry is to use it doesn't matter whether you use 2 or 4, just be consistent, do not fight between each other, but generally, tabs are not common with Bash, so stick to spaces. So the most important outcome of this style guide is to be just consistent, right? So whatever you encounter in the current scripts, just follow the same style, and do not try to follow your rules. There are also other recommendations besides what is written in Google style guide. For example, you shouldn't ever parse output of ls, which probably you did because it's how to list the current directory, of course, with ls, so why not use in the script? But The drawback of ls is that you cannot distinguish what is separate file and what is just the name of the file. Because in Linux, you can have new lines in names of the files, and then output of ls doesn't distinguish it. So by looking into this output, we could say that we have 4 files, right? But actually, we have 3 in this case. So we can never rely on the output of ls, and there is no way to make it working. There are other means of listing files in directory that are reliable. ls isn't. Also, there is common to avoid the abuse of animals in bash, right? The most common abuse is to use cats where they shouldn't be used. Because in general, the documentation says that cat is to concatenate files, and this is its use case. However, very often I see in the scripts I review that people are cutting the file and then invoking the commands. However, if you look into them, they all have equivalence, right? If you want to just display a file, we just put a parameter to grep or less commands. We don't need to cut the file, which is supposed to do concatenation. So don't abuse cuts. It's spinning another process for no reason. And there is a second recommendation to not use harvester for your flower pot, meaning kill -9 is like using some very, I would say, harsh tool to do very simple job, right? So how the process should be generally stopped is just kill, right? Kill -9, it forcibly closes it immediately, and it doesn't give a chance to do any cleanup, even to say on the console that I'm shutting down, right? So generally, your application should be prepared to handle kill -9, and you should test for it, right? Because you always may just take a plug out of your socket, right? But this should not be a default in your stopping scripts. Give a chance for applications to nicely shut down, say in logs that it is shutting down, clean some resources. And if your application doesn't respond to the kill signal, then you can also send kill -2 and -1, right? Those are more aggressive. But there are no other options. So if by sending various kill signals, like 15, 2, and 1, application still doesn't close down, you should just remove this binary because application is wrongly written, right? It just does not respond to close. So kill -9 is sign of bad design of your apps. So Clement Delafrage, he was speaker here on Devoxx a couple of years ago. He wrote on Twitter that generally we should avoid the bash. He knows about all those strange things that are going on. He's begging people don't use it. It has so many dark parts. But if you need, you should use set -EUO pipefail at least and run the shell check. So let's talk about those. So this EUO pipefail is unofficial strict mode of the bash. It puts some reasonable defaults that probably all your scripts should use. And we know those defaults from any other programming languages, right? That if there is error, we should fail, which sounds normal, but it is not normal in bash. We need to set this explicitly. When we are referencing an undefined variable, we know it from the beginning. We need to set this -u, and pipefail, it appears that just -e is not enough because every error happening at the end of piping. If you want to fail, if there is error during the piping, there is another option that we need to set. So what this prevents from is, for example, this very popular code that many of us have written, that it is going to some directory, for example, with logs, and it's doing some purging, right? Let's remove some obsolete data. And by default, the bash, if it cannot change the directory, let's say we are in the home, and we are changing directory to the directory with logs. If for some reason this variable is not set, or this directory doesn't exist, it will invoke the second command, which will remove all the files we have. That's why it is so important to use this strict mode, then the script will just end up after the fail command and won't proceed any further. However, there are many gotchas. This set -e doesn't prevent us from, for example, exiting the script if the command fails and we declare the variable as local. So the script still will continue because the local is the status, the fail status, right? So we need to declare and assign the commands separately. So there is an entire page of the set -e gotchas. So this strict mode doesn't guarantee you much. It just works in the most common cases, but still you may check on this village org all the cases that you should be aware that still may happen and not fail your script. Then shell check. The shell check is the static analysis tool that just looks for the bugs in your script, the most common issues. You may install it on the Linux by apt-get, you may install it on the Windows via scoop. In general, it is the library written in Haskell that has integrations with many online scanning services, but also there are binaries that you could use on Linux, Windows, that you could download. And it is open source that you can use it as often as you want, also locally. There is a web page that you can paste your scripts and be validated. So if you don't have any tools ready for it, you just go to the shell check net, paste your script, and it gets validated. For example, here in this case, it's reporting us that the shebang is not how it should be. It should begin with the hash. Also, if the assignment of the variable has the spaces around the, this assignment sign, it won't work, right? So that's what we know from Java. It won't work in Bash without any error, of course. It will just move the script forward. So shell check could detect such errors very quickly. And there was a plugin written for IntelliJ that could validate our files, written by Piotr Wielgolaski, right? But this guy created this plugin, but just a couple months after Piotr created this plugin for shell check, I was using it, then the guys from JetBrains added the native support for shell check and Bash in IntelliJ IDEA. So have you tried it already? Have you played with 2009.2 EAP version? Any one of you? Not yet. So probably you will use it soon because there will be official version in several weeks available. So every one of us will get the Bash support in IntelliJ natively. So by writing the wrong code, like, for example, this if without the space before the condition, the shell check integration in IntelliJ will report it immediately within milliseconds of typing that there is something wrong, you missed the space, it won't work. Right, and it works in the way that IntelliJ asks you whenever it detects that you are creating Bash script, whether to install this shell check locally, you press the button, and then you get command. It's installed after downloading from the official repository, and you get validations. And those validations are, as you see, really useful. For example, you can reference the parameters up to 9 of your function, but if you try to reference the parameter 10, it doesn't work. It will reference the first, and the 0 will be treated as a string. So the shell check could detect such error, which I wouldn't detect personally on the code review. For example, this declaration of array looks perfectly fine, right? But actually, you cannot use commas in the arrays. Only spaces are allowed. For example, here, if you try to compare a variable with 1, and if it's the 1, you rather expect the true, but it won't work. It will return the false because you forgot to put the spaces around the equals sign, right? So the shell check could detect such mistakes. And for example, the false in the if statement, if you type it like that, will return the true. So false is true. Remove the brackets, right? So many gotchas that wait for you when you try to use bash, but the shell check helps to fight with them. Of course, there are exceptions, right? So not always we will accept all the suggestions. For example, sometimes we want indeed word splitting happening. That's why we have options, either to apply automatically this suggestion, or we suppress with the command. IntelliJ puts this command into the code, and we won't get warning again. So you may have impression that shell check is awesome at the very beginning, but then probably you will rethink whether indeed you should use the bash for this task if you may run into so many troubles. So this was my impression after using the shell check. It could detect so many issues in the simple scripts that there is something wrong with the language, rather. And wait spaces are important, and as well, so there is shfmt tool that is available that's written in the Go command line tool, and IntelliJ has working integration. There was no integration before. You needed to run it from command line, but right now it is. So you just download the tool from the internet. It downloads it to some plugin directory, and you can configure as any other formatter in IntelliJ finally, and you just press Ctrl-Alt-L, and your scripts are reformatted right now. So it works as it should from the very beginning. And there is yet more feature added in latest IntelliJ, which is editor config support, which is extended to all the custom options. So we can, for example, configure this formatter directly in the repository, not in your IntelliJ settings just for you, but for all your team members in the repository that will be shared between all the users of IntelliJ, and it will override any custom developers configs. So everyone will be on the same page with the config of formatter, which is mostly the issue. And there are live templates available in IntelliJ. Many things could be made faster. You don't need to type full functions. You don't need to remember the syntax. For example, if you want to perform the for loop, you just type for, tab, as in other language. It will just expand, suggest you. Even for find, it works. It helps you to remember all the weird syntax. If you have some literówkas, for example, you will get the possibility to fix those literówkas. By Shift F6, you rename the variable, all the occurrences are changed, and also you get syntax completion like in any other language. Also, you will get the suggestion of what is on the disk to have your paths valid. So this was all added in the latest IntelliJ. Hope soon it will be official. There is also a feature of explaining the shell code. There is web page explainshell.com that has 30,000 of parsed man pages, and it has integration with the IntelliJ in the way that you press Alt-Enter, you choose explain shell option, and it, for example, says you that you invoked WC with the command -L, which means printing the new line counts, and it works for almost all Linux commands. So finally, you can direct from IDE understand the bash. Still, there are several defects open for it, but hopefully when the IntelliJ will be out of EAP, they will be fixed. So I'm waiting for it, and there is a thing about debugging. How to debug the scripts. So IntelliJ doesn't have the support for it yet. Generally, debugging is really hard, as you see. It's sometimes twice as hard as writing the code. And basically, Bash has some debugger available, BashDB. Maybe at some point there will be integration. But the basic tools that are available are those echoes, Ts. Yeah, we don't have anything better. Some alternatives are set-6, that just prints results of evaluation of every line, and set-v, that prints each command before execution. Also, there is mode of set-n, which just checks the syntax if it's valid before executions, and there are various ways how to put those options. You can put it into shebang, you may put it as a parameters to bash, and so on. So before, you may have used bash support plugin, right, in IntelliJ. When with this EAP, it is no longer valid. It conflicts with it. So the guy that was the author of this bash support plugin right now is quite disappointed, and there is a plan to release some bash support pro with maybe some debugging, maybe some more advanced feature that won't be implemented by JetBrains. But for now, there is no more reason to use this old IntelliJ plugin. And reality of testing. So generally, the testing is area in the bash that many people think, OK, we should do it, but we don't do it, right? So we should do unit tests, but we don't know how to do unit tests. We should do mocking, but we don't know how to do. And generally, we end up with manual testing. However, the thing is that unit testing of bash doesn't really make sense, because unit tests are for isolated code, where we don't interact with many tools and processes, right? So if we have many various side effects, actually it's better to perform integration testing of entire script, right? So you should prepare your entire environment, run within Docker container or Jenkins workspace, and observe the results. Do not go into the direction of unit testing of your scripts. If you need it, probably you put too much logic into your scripts, and that's not the right language. So unit testing is an exception, that if you have some library in bash, then OK, you may use it, but generally you should use Kotlin, Groovy, Python, any other language, if testing is required. So there are lots of tools for bash available, various style guides, and the bash scripts will run on production for years. So take care about the quality, because if they don't work, they will call you on the Saturday in the morning. And the outcome is just to use IntelliJ, the latest one. EAP is quite stable. You can download it even tomorrow. Check your scripts whether they pass the formatting and the shell check. And if you require testing, do not forget that testing is really important, but integration testing, not necessarily unit testing. Thank you. Any questions for me?
Have you tried any unit testing frameworks for bash, like Devoxx?
Yes, Devoxx is available, but I haven't tried because I follow this rule. Whenever I have more complex logic that requires unit testing, I use Groovy for it, personally. But I know it's working. It has many stars on GitHub. This community is growing, so yeah, it's possible. But I don't find any use case in my area. Any other question?
Maybe you heard about some work in the Linux community to create next generation shell language. Is there something like that?
I haven't heard. Right, so people mostly focus, I think, on those higher level languages, like Python, Kotlin, Groovy, right? And I haven't heard about new shell. It will be hard to beat bash. So bash is almost everywhere, and it took like 50 years to propagate this shell to every devices. So even if something new is invented, right, it will take a really long time to be popular on all the environments possible. So I think the bash will be with us for 50 years more, unfortunately. So we need to learn it. Every software developer, I think, should know those tricky parts of bash. Sure. If you invoke the bash script from Groovy? So generally, if you invoke the bash from Groovy, the performance will be worse, yeah? That you need to run the Groovy, invoke the command, communicate with the bash, and then run the bash command, so it's much slower, right? So the alternative would be to use native operations in Groovy, right? From, for example, Java I/O, right? That directly operate with files. What I mean by poor bash performance is, for example, the computational performance, yeah? If you have some algorithm to compute some numbers, to, for example, work on strings, it will be slower than any other high-level language. because everything is string. There are a lot of and it's interpreted language. It just takes time to interpret every line. So using Groovy just to invoke the bash commands won't help anything. Okay.
There is an option in ls where you can escape those unsafe characters. And personally, I have this option enabled in my alias.
All right.
So it may be possible, but I
Mm-hmm.
never tried in practice.
All right. So for some use cases, maybe it is possible, right? You don't require exact file names. You just want to decant. Yeah, do the ls, escape the invalid characters, and do the decant. Maybe it's fine. But generally, it is slower than native bash operations, how to list the files and how to count the files. So maybe it's possible, but there is no actual reason to use ls. I should put it this way. All right. Thank you very much. Enjoy your evening. It was a great conference, and I'm glad you survived.